So many people are feeling blocked from connecting with other people. And if you find yourself trying and trying, but everything seems shallow and nothing seems to lead to friendship, or people even seem to be pulling away from you, there might be a problem with your attunement, your ability to sense another person's openness or read the room, as we say. So when you're not connecting, instead of just assuming that other people are closed, there are some adjustments that you can make in yourself that help you to tune in better so that other people feel seen and heard and like you're present with them. Now, attunement is a super attractive quality to people in almost every context. If you've got attunement going on, people will be drawn to you. And you don't have to be born with it. In fact, if you had trauma when you were a kid, your attunement might have been damaged, at least a little bit, which has telltale signs in some behaviors that I'm going to list for you in this video, all right? So here are some of the signs that your attunement to other people might be a bit off. First, you give unsolicited advice. Do you know what that is? It's when you tell people what to do when they didn't ask you, what should I do? And this is so common. People do it to each other all the time. If you've ever had like a major illness, when you tell people, I have a major illness, I've been in the hospital, you are going to be bombarded by people who are not attuned, who go, oh, you know what you need to do. You know what medicine you need to take. You know what doctor you need to talk to, what device, what machine, what type of diet, what you need to do. And they'll do this around like weight loss. They'll do it around career, and they'll do it around feelings. And I've noticed that among women, sometimes a lot of how we connect with each other is go, hey, how you doing? How you doing? Well, I'm having this hard thing go on. Well, good friends, women friends, men friends, any kind of friends, are able to hear you say what you're struggling with without jumping in and projecting, right? that they have the answer for you and you just got to listen to them. It's a lack of attunement to assume that just because you're having a problem means you are completely out of touch with solutions. So I remember I was in the hospital on and off for about 4 years, some years back. It was really rough. It was an injury caused by a medical error, a surgery where they damaged a part of my body, and I had 14 surgeries for them to try to fix it. And it didn't go very well. In the end, I did heal, but it was a huge process. And when I would tell people about it, they're like, you need to be taking this vitamin. You need to be eating this. And it was so frustrating because the thing is, it was an injury. It had nothing to do with what I was eating. And in fact, in the end, how I healed it was by tuning out all kinds of input and getting in touch with myself. And what I could feel in myself when I became attuned to myself was how traumatized I was inside. I had this like chronic level of freak out going on. I had been going through a lot in my life. I had gotten divorced and was a single mom. I had lost my job. I had tried dating someone and they died. I had this like going on in my body all the time. And when I was able to be quiet with myself, which actually, ironically, being in the hospital allowed, I could feel what was going on. And I returned to my daily practice techniques, which, by the way, if you've never done them, I talk about them all the time on this channel, and you can find them down in the description section. It's a free course. It's a technique for getting the fearful and resentful thoughts out. And it's been very powerful for me to attune to myself. So when people give unsolicited advice, they're basically like jamming the radar on your own intuition about what's going on. It's not a good thing to do. It's a projection of themselves onto you, and it'll generally be received as criticism or not listening, or at best, maybe just like self-centeredness. So it's not good to give unsolicited advice. And you can do something instead, right? You can say, I had something like that once. If you ever want to hear what I tried, I'm happy to tell you. And I'm telling you, they probably are not interested. Sometimes when people are sick or unemployed or having a hard time, they're already overwhelmed. What they need is just to know, like, I'm your friend. I'm hearing you. I get it. I feel for you. You can just be present with somebody when they're struggling without telling them what to do. And when you do that, there's like more closeness comes in. You feel more connected. And when your friends feel more connected to you, they might come to you to ask your opinion about things. But that is one really very simple fix that you can make. It's easier said than done, but just to totally end unsolicited advice about what other people should do. All right, a second way that your attunement might be off is a lack of curiosity, where all your opinions about everything are set, everything is, a comment on stuff. Oh, that's because this, and the government always blah, blah, blah. And it's instead of having something you ask about, so not having curiosity. So when somebody says something that you've never heard before or you don't agree with, you could say, that's interesting. What made you come to that conclusion? And actually just listen and let go of your agenda to correct them or try to make sure they understand your way of thinking, but be sincerely curious about how other people feel and what they believe and how they see the world. And you can come out of that still disagreeing with them, but closer to them. And I'm telling you, if you haven't yet developed a capacity to be comfortable in the presence of people who have different opinions, now I'm not talking about opinion bullies. Nobody's so comfortable with people, being bullies about that. But that's why I'm saying don't you be an opinion bully. You can have an opinion difference and have it kindly without any kind of criticism. And I want everybody to remember, it's actually good for people to see things in different ways. If we didn't, we'd be robots, we'd just be parts of a computer. If we didn't have a different lens on things. And especially in this time where I just think that, powerful forces want us to be angry at each other, want us to believe that there's only one right opinion and everybody who doesn't have it is bad. This is very, very harmful for your relationships. And if you're going to make a positive contribution in the world, you actually need to learn to stay connected with people and to have a social fabric that is tolerant of people seeing things in different ways. Not just people having different lifestyles, which I think is at this time in history, people are a little more tolerant, but seeing things in different ways, and let that be okay. And respect people and not assume that they only have a difference of opinion from you because they're evil or stupid or low information or something, but that they actually have a life experience that's led them to that. Be curious. It's a good way to connect. So you can ask people too, and it's not just about controversy, but when, let's say, people have gone on a vacation, right? You can say, tell me about that. How did it go? What was the best part of it? Is it true that the food in France is so good? Because I was just in France. And it's really fun for me when people ask me questions about my vacation. And then out of attunement, I try not to go on, but it really does make me happy when people are aware that, I just did some traveling and I had some hard things happen and I had some exciting things happen. My son got really sick and I hurt my foot really bad, and I don't need to go on about it, but I love that people are curious. So another thing you can express curiosity about, and this is a way to invite people into a conversation, and it's actually a nice little gentle tactic you can use if things feel tense or disconnected, but you can notice something that's in the environment. It's so nice when you don't have to always talk about my feelings, your feelings. You can talk about just the world. You can talk about the environment. And so my husband and I were walking the other night, and there was a really nice sunset. And I was saying, hey, come here, look at this. I wonder what makes the clouds do that. They were piled so high, and they were shimmering, and they had these colors. And I was wondering what makes them do that. And that's me just saying, hey, look at the sunset doesn't tend to get his attention as much as a nice science question. And I didn't ask it to manipulate him, but I just noticed he really likes it when I ask questions and ask him to think about something and about with the why of things. He loves that. And so I noted that, to put that in my pocket as a way to connect with people. All right, here's another way that our attunement can get off, and it's insensitivity to other people, especially the high points and the low points. So let's say that somebody just finished a training or got a degree in something. So we know that sometimes, but have you ever gotten so caught up in your own life or gotten so overwhelmed with your own problems that you forgot to ask friends about it? Or to say, hey, you finished the semester, didn't you? And it was your first semester in your new program. How was it? How'd you do? Well, good job. That was a huge accomplishment. I know you going back to school at this point was a big deal. You know, if you think that there's anything wrong with laying it on a bit thick, there's nothing wrong with laying it on a bit thick. People are walking around so hungry to be seen and recognized and validated a little bit. So for the example of somebody who's gone back to school, you know, that is a big deal. How many people would like to go back to school, but really couldn't overcome all the barriers in front of them? A lot. So when somebody does do it, we gotta hug that person, celebrate them, maybe bring them a cupcake or whatever, something special to recognize that something good happened. To not do that is insensitive, and it doesn't foster connection. And then conversely, when people have had something sad, so let's say their parent died and it's a year later. And this is one thing that Facebook can be handy for, is you know when it's somebody's birthday, because there was a time when I used to remember everybody's birthday, but now I don't, and I have so many people connected to on Facebook that I don't always even know who they are. So I don't go and rush in and say happy birthday to people I don't know. But I try to show up and honor people for their high points, things like birthdays, or if I'm, scrolling through social media and somebody's showing a picture of a grandchild or a new house or a really, beautiful pair of running shoes or something. I try to show up and acknowledge it for them. I'm telling you, if you want to be friends with people, give them a little validation for what's wonderful and for what's hard in their life. That's kind of the material of what closeness is. You don't have to comment. You don't have to relate a similar experience to them. You can just say, oh gosh, those are fantastic running shoes, or the earring that you're wearing just caught the light in that picture and I was scrolling by and then I saw you and I saw how happy you look. Congratulations. So you can always find reasons to give people a kind word or a pat on the back, and you will be rewarded richly with a growth in your connection with them. Here's a weakness that we have sometimes, and it's a form of our insensitivity. You can't own mistakes. So a lot of us were not trained at home what to do when we're mortified or embarrassed about something we've done, or when somebody tells us, hey, you kind of hurt my feelings. So, what do? We clam up, we get defensive, we explain ourselves and justify it, we point out, well, you did the same thing, right? Or we know that we did sort of something a little bit wrong to somebody. Maybe we forgot to pay them back for a small amount that they lent us at a lunch or something. And we don't bring it up unless they bring it up. So this is another thing that's part of insensitivity. And it's totally like how people were socialized. And if you weren't really cared for as a kid, it can be really easy for your mind to always flip to trying to relate to somebody when they tell you something hard. So let's say somebody says, yeah, I went to the doctor last week and it turns out I have skin cancer. And here's what an insensitive person does, trying to relate, say, oh, wow, my aunt had skin cancer. And, she had this thing and they took them off and she did this thing. But you miss the part where you go, oh, wow, are you worried about it? How do you feel about it? And so what's going to happen now? And do you have everything you need? Those are the things that a sensitive, attuned person says. Because when somebody's telling you that something hard is happening like that, or something unpleasant or dangerous or life-threatening, the attuned response is to tune into the feeling that they're having. And to let them know that you heard that. So likewise, this is a little bit of a different situation, but so having a party. Have you ever done this? I throw parties. I wasn't always somebody who threw parties, but now I have enough healing that I really do like to throw parties, and my husband likes to cook, and so sometimes we have parties. And I invite people, and some people never get back to me, which is kind of insensitive. They're not thinking about how I might feel. Some people get back and say, great, I'm coming. Yay. Some people say, oh, thank you for the invitation. I'm not going to be able to make it. Okay, that's okay too. And some people say, oh, I can't make it. I'm invited to 3 different parties that day. And so if I have time, I'll drop by, but probably not. Ouch, that hurts. That's really insensitive to the fact that, I don't know, if you've ever, if you have this around throwing a party, no matter how many times I do it, it feels really bad when, when people don't realize that I was going out on a limb to even throw a party and invite them. And so I can handle it. I have my daily practice techniques to deal with it. But I have learned that when you get invited to a party, be gracious. You don't have to tell the person if you have to decline. You don't have to tell them about the amazing party you're already going to. That's a little bit insensitive. You just can say, oh, I'm sorry, I have something already scheduled, but I would love to spend time with you, and I hope I can come next time. And that way you're responding to the vulnerability of the invitation. So you're paying attention. All right. Here's another way that we can lack attunement, and I call it being shielded. And this is something that is really normal, but we develop these habits of being always so busy, or always in a crisis, or always so exhausted. Do you have any of those things? Like, that's something that I've done, and I actually am. I'm pretty busy. It makes me pretty tired, but I found out that when I talked about it a lot, I was actually shutting down connection with people. They were trying to be considerate and not bother me, so they stopped calling me. And I was like, hey, how come I haven't heard from you in so many weeks? And they go, well, you were so busy. You were always telling me how you're so tired and busy. Aha, okay, so lesson learned. My attunement was, I don't need to lay that on other people. I can set boundaries for my time and my energy as needed, but keep the channels open for the connection. So much of this is about boundaries. So many ways that people who had a dysfunctional childhood end up losing attunement is because the boundaries, the skills and practice of setting boundaries isn't there. When you don't have boundaries, you can't really afford to connect with people. You have to kind of come up with a way to keep one foot out the door if you're going to hang out with people at all. Because if you can't sort of say no, or realize, oh, this isn't what I wanted to get into, or this party's getting weird, or this date is very uncomfortable, you need to know confidently that you can get out of it. So it's about setting boundaries. All right, here's another way that people lack attunement, and it's dogmatism. Just having very strong points of view, usually about like religion or politics or health, I would say, about what you should and shouldn't eat. And I guess we all know what it feels like to eat with somebody who's like, you're not going to eat that, are you? And that's their dogmatism. They have strong opinions about what should and shouldn't be eaten. And obviously politics. That's why, like, on the Zoom calls for our daily practice group, we're just like, we leave politics at the door, because a lot of people are involved and care and are affected by it, but we don't take it up in the group because we have a common purpose, and we're very sensitive to that common purpose. We're learning a technique for stress release, and so we don't have to bring it into everything that we do. I mean, that is a boundary. With religion or lack of religion, a lot of what I've learned about people and about trauma, I've learned from reading the comments on the 700 or so videos that I've posted on YouTube. I can't even remember how many. A lot of videos. And people comment, and I try to read all the comments. I don't respond personally to all of them, but I try to read them. And there can be these very dogmatic comments there sometimes. So somebody might put a comment. It breaks my heart, this incredible tenderness that people bring sometimes, and they've watched a video that I've made, and they're telling me, or maybe they're telling other people in the comment section. I try to be attuned to that. I don't have to respond if they're sort of saying something to everybody, but they will come in and just share, like, oh, this video is talking about something that's been so hard for me, and I've been sad all my life, and I'm feeling scared and discouraged about how I'm going to turn this around. I've tried certain things, it hasn't worked, and I'm a little bit hopeful, but I hate to get my hopes up. They're saying something so near to their hearts. So there's these very attuned people who will come in sometimes and say, I'm so proud of you, or I hear what you're saying, I relate, and I hope you'll persevere. I know you can do it. So attuned and supportive things. And then there's people who just come in and say, well, that will never happen because people are just jerks. That's dogmatic. That's a very negative point of view that they have, but they're basically putting their belief system out there I do a video, let's say, about like being attuned or something, and they just come in and say, it doesn't matter if you're tuned, nobody cares, nobody listens, all men are just terrible, or all women are just this. Or here's one, like I love religious people, but there's a way that some people are dogmatically religious, and they get in there and somebody has just said they're struggling with something, they've been trying so hard, and they go, you just need Jesus. And I understand what they're saying, but the thing is, if it were true that you just need Jesus, then everybody who went to church would be a perfect person, which is obvious to the eye and ear that everybody is struggling. All people are human, whether they're religious or not, or this religion or that one, or spiritual. All people struggle sometimes, and all people are finding their own answers to these things. And so to just glop your solution down on somebody else is a way to shut down that attunement, that connection. And if you do want to influence people, if you do want to help them, if you think that the way that you do life, the way that you are spiritual or not spiritual, but that you have ways that are helpful and you want to influence people in a positive way, you start by allowing them to be themselves, and you give them space to find out who you are. And if they are attracted, they might ask you about it. Do you know that phrase, attraction, not promotion? They say that in 12-step, and it's so good. Attraction, not promotion. I remember when I first started going to Al-Anon, the program for families of alcoholics. It was so helpful to me, and I went running home to my family of origin. We had just had a bunch of family members die of alcoholism, actually, and drug addiction. And I ran home and I'm like, everybody, this Al-Anon, it's the best thing. Everybody has to do it. It's the answer. It's the way. And everybody was just like, woo! They didn't want to hear it. They thought I was crazy, which I wasn't crazy. I had found help, but it wasn't effective for me to come and try to cram it on them. It was a lack of attunement. And if there's one thing I've learned from doing Crappy Childhood Fairy, I and you, none of us, we do not know the answer for each person. We don't know what other people need. We don't know what their next step is. And we do know that people need support. They need the presence of other people while they figure out their own next steps, while they do that. Now, I'm not trying to deny that there are ways of life. There's like religious practices. There are sets of principles, moral principles that you can guide your life by. Stoicism. I love Stoicism. Many of us do. So there's principles that you can use and follow. And it's fabulous that people before us have sort of figured out, here are some principles you can apply. And the Crappy Childhood Fairy method has principles. We have principles like, not all the answers come from talking about the trauma. Sometimes you can refrain from talking and write about it instead. And sometimes healing comes not from looking at the past, even though that's necessary sometimes, but about looking at what are the symptoms going on right now. Those are some of our principles. But if I came out at you yelling and just going, stop talking about the past, stop talking at all, you have to write, you can't look at that. Would you listen to me? No, and nor should you. I don't have your answers. I can tell you what's worked for me, and you get to decide if you do that. So when we interpret everything through our own personal lens, whether it's health, politics, healing, religion, it's a way that we separate from other people. And I think a lot of times it's motivated by an insecurity or even a joy sometimes, that, hey, I found what works. But in maturity, as we get older, I might be older than you watching this for some of you. And I'll tell you, you start to learn like it just doesn't work. And that's also why in our daily practice calls and group coaching calls, we say, don't give unsolicited advice, especially stuff like, you know what you need? You need a good therapist. That's really common. A lot of people, if it's not like a religious thing that you have to do, that they believe that you just have to do and it will solve all your problems, they think that if you just went to therapy, it would solve all your problems. Well, that's also unsolicited advice. So we allow people to sort of find and discover intuitively and through their own experience what they believe their next steps are. Unless they break the law, in which case we decide for them. That's the exception. All right. Another way that you may be lacking attunement and sort of pushing people away is by being untrustworthy. And I'm talking about very specific, subtle things that not everybody realizes they're doing. One is gossip. All right. Gossip is very fun to listen to. And it also clues us in that the person who's doing the gossiping is not a safe person to tell things to. So simultaneously, we would be drawn to somebody who's gossiping, but pull away. So if you're doing gossip, talking about people who aren't present, for entertainment purposes, even if they're strangers, you're cluing other people that you're not quite a safe person. And so, consider letting that go, just not gossiping. Another sort of habit of speech that can trigger people to feel sort of unsafe around you is exaggerating. And I'm the queen of this. That's which is an exaggeration. I'm not the queen. I'm not the worst there ever was. But I had a habit of speech, and maybe I still do. I've worked on it, but where I will sort of like push it to the top. I'll be like, everyone feels this way, nobody ever and I've tolerated so much all my life. So I just use these like nobody, always, ever, all my life. Can't, won't. And it's an exaggeration. And I'm trying to make my point, where I think it comes from is I wasn't listened to very well. And I probably developed a habit of being a little more dramatic to try to like grab people by the ears so they would listen to me, the grown-ups in my life. But the thing is, it comes off as a little bit, shaky as a trustworthy person. That's not the person who exaggerates. Comes off as a bit of a loose cannon. And so that was something that I had to work on. And then here's one that I don't like, because I'm a really busy person. I have a little bit of free time, but sometimes people will say, hey, you want to get together? And I'll go, yeah, sure. And they go, when are you free? And I'll go, well, I have this time and I have this time. And they go, okay, I'll get back to you. And often they don't. And that feels a little bit untrustworthy to me too, or it hurts a little bit. And it makes me a little reluctant to make a plan with people if they don't just come through. Like if you ask, then come through and you tell me when you're available and let's get that thing decided. Or say, I can't decide right now, but I'll let you know by this time so that I'm not holding all that time available. It just hurts a little bit. It hurts a little bit and feels untrustworthy. I guess what people call that is flaky. So why do we end up with these habits? Even if we're good people, why do we end up with these habits that lack attunement? If you recognize these traits in yourself, it's very likely that you developed them because your family had those traits, or they didn't train you. They weren't really present with you, socializing you and teaching you, sort of the fine points of interacting with people and how to be an attuned person. Now, even if they trained you, if you went through a lot of neglect and abuse, that kind of trauma can dull your attunement. Attunement is, it's not just something that you learn, it's a neurological function. It's something that you can sense with your nervous system. Like when you walk in and you're like, oh, what's going on? There's some sort of like grim mood in the room, or everybody seems like they're laughing behind my back. Like you can sense things, right? But when you've been traumatized, either because of the neurological injury or because you were gaslit about what was really going on, like, mommy's not drunk, get in the car. Either the neurological injury of neglect or the sort of lying to you about reality, you're not good at reading the room. You're not good at reading the signals. Like, even if somebody has to kick you under the table, instead of just like feeling the vibe when people are like, don't talk about that thing you're talking about in front of everybody here, it's private, right? That's attunement. Attunement, being sensitive to when people are trying to signal you, like, don't talk about it. Or come here and help me out. I feel threatened by this person. So also, because we're living with trauma symptoms, we can tend to fill up with fear in social situations. And you know what happens when we're full of fear? We become very self-centered. And I don't say that in a judgmental way, but it's just like, it's very hard to pay attention to what other people are feeling and what's going on when just trying to be okay in the moment is kind of using up all your consciousness. I always use the analogy, it's like having headphones on, very loud, but pretending you're in the room, but you can't really hear people. So you're not attuned. And then, to be actually self-centered is to see people as like, are they a good companion for me? Do I like how I feel around them? But not really asking ourselves the converse. Am I a good companion for them? How are they feeling around me? And a good attuned person is able to hold both of those things. Like, how am I feeling? How are they feeling? Am I a good friend? Are they a good friend? And once we start making mistakes and we feel some shame, we can get very defensive. And when we're defensive, it'll feel like any bit of criticism if it's coming, if I did something wrong and you're about to criticize me, it feels like it's going to tip you over. It feels like it's going to break you. At its worst, trauma can make criticism feel like a mortal threat, and that you'll just die if it gets in, like you can't let it in. And so defensiveness is a survival strategy, but it works terribly in friendships. So when somebody's unhappy about something, now I'm trusting that you're choosing friends who have criticisms that are not vicious and irrational. And actually, I know we've all had those friends too. So that the rules don't apply to that. You need boundaries with people who are vicious. But when a friend is saying, hey, you really hurt my feelings, and if all you've got is defensiveness, what's going to happen as a consequence of that is a pulling away. So if you can hang out and hear what it is, and very gently with yourself and gently with them say, oh, I care about this. I want to hear what it is. I want to hear what your experience was. And then try not to say anything. Don't say anything right away. Just hold on. Just let it go by, right? Let it go by. If you don't know what to say, you can say, all right, I'm going to think about that. Thank you for telling me. And then you can think about it. I don't know about you, but with criticism, sometimes I need a lot of time to process. My husband is more introverted. He needs a lot of time to process basically everything. And sometimes if feelings are up, I'm just like, no, I want to process everything like right now. I want to talk really fast. I want to talk about everything. And he'll just be like, whoa, and he pulls away, right? He pulls away. So I make allowances for that. Now I know him well enough that he doesn't process everything so fast, and I have to give him space. And that's his defendedness. My defensiveness is to start like refuting and be like, no, I didn't do that. No. And it's not good. So actually like getting a little space and asking for it is a positive thing. Just saying, all right, I'm going to think about that. And then if you really want to go to the advanced level, get back to them about it. And even ask a question and say, hey, I wanted to ask you something about that. When you said that you felt like I was not talking to you at the dinner party, I was just wondering, was there a particular moment that was the most hurtful? Because I want to understand what happened. For that, you get an A. If you can learn what it is, if you can be open to what it is that's pushing people away, that's making your relationships too watery, not as substantial, not as solid as you would like them to be, you win. This is how your life becomes rich with relationships. All right. You're going to need boundaries. Like I said earlier, you're going to need to have confidence that you can get out of a situation, and therefore you can afford to get into a situation. So when you get invited to do something new or hang out with a group of people you've never hung out with before, people who have trauma wounds will often isolate rather than do that because the triggers that could be set off could be too much to deal with. When you have boundaries that you can just say, hey, everyone, I think I'm going to call it a night. Thank you for a nice night out. And they'll say, hey, where are you going so early? And you go, I know, but I was just realizing I need to go right now. A very gracious exit is your boundary. You'll be confident in using your boundaries when you know how to use them elegantly with the least amount of offense to other people. Also, to learn how to buffer your strong emotions. If you had trauma, sometimes emotional dysregulation is going to bring your emotions kind of rushing out quite strongly. And so one of the things that we practice in healing is emotional self-regulation. It doesn't mean we deny our feelings or stuff them down and never deal with them. We just start to become conscious that there are some situations where we don't want our strongest feelings kind of leaking out on everybody, that we're not in the best, safest situation. For example, like when I used to have a boss, right? I didn't want to cry in front of the boss. I did it a couple times, but it was a very difficult and uncomfortable situation. And I would have preferred to emotionally self-regulate and deal with my emotions over here and come back with clear communication, in order to negotiate what I wanted out of the situation. That was my preference. The beautiful thing about healing is you get to decide where you want your life to be. You get to decide how emotional you feel good about being and where you'd rather be discreet and calm. And you get to start having the skills where that works for you. So these are some of my tips on how to develop your attunement. I think it's a topic I want to talk more about. I'm interested to hear your experience with it down in the comments. And I want to leave you with my daily practice techniques, because this is exactly where I learned my attunement, where I was able to take those headphones off, metaphorically speaking, that were so loud, and so that I could tune into what was right for me, what's going on in the room. These are twin techniques. One is a very specific writing technique, followed by a very simple meditation. I do this twice a day. And if you want to give it a try, it's free. I put it all in videos. You can access those in the free course right there. And I will see you very soon.